I have played many video games over the years on different platforms, different genres, and different franchises. And of those genres, my favorite genre of video games has always been role playing games, or RPGs for short. Over the course of many years, we have seen the release of many different RPGs, some ambitious, others basic and by the books. And throughout the history of RPGs, I believe many people have lost sight of what an RPG really is. Is God of War an RPG for having its own loot game with stats and upgrades? Or what about GTA? Is that an RPG because you have the freedom to explore a world and do whatever you please, role-playing as a criminal in a modern age? Or is an RPG simply a game where you roleplay as a character in a game? If so, does that make every video game an RPG? In my opinion, an RPG is a game that doesn't just let you roleplay as a character, but a game that allows you to immerse yourself in a world that runs on its own rules and regulations, with upgrades and stats that have enough flexibility to truly make your character your own, and above all, makes you feel as though you are living a quote-unquote second life in the fictional world that you indulge yourself in. And it is by these metrics that Kingdom Come Deliverance proves itself to be the greatest example of an RPG in my eyes. It may not be the objectively best game ever, it's not even my favorite, but out of the RPGs that I've played, I have never been so immersed, so indulged in the game before like this one. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a game that has rules, and those rules not only complement the world, but the gameplay. Your actions have consequences and you must always be aware of them. You may not know this, but Kingdom Come Deliverance was actually a Kickstarter project, with over $1.5 million of its budget owing credit to that. While this doesn't quite qualify it for an indie title, it's still miles away from reaching AAA status, and you can tell when you play it. This game was in development for 5 years and went through many changes in its development cycle. This game quite nearly entered development hell, quote unquote, on more than one occasion, and released in an extremely buggy and unfinished state. And yet, despite all of this, I still consider it to be the greatest RPG that I've ever played. Considering everything this game went through in its development, this game should not exist, and yet it does. And what a game it is. Kingdom Come Deliverance is set in 1403 Bohemia and is extremely realistic and historically accurate, so much so that the game prides itself on it, with many of its locations being real places, some still standing today. Many of the characters you meet and encounter being real people or based on real people at the very least. You can actually line up the map in Kingdom Come Deliverance and compare it to the same location on Google Maps, say, and see many similarities. And once you know all this, it only adds to the immersion of this game. I can honestly say that I've never played a game as immersive or realistic as this one, and while many people may consider this take on extreme realism redundant or needless, I see it as a dedication to the immersion this game strives for. Your bow doesn't have a reticle in this game, and it is extremely hard to use, and it's up to you to improve. You can kill almost every NPC in the game, not to mention those NPCs are consistent with the environment. You'll see the same people in the same towns. You can converse with almost every NPC in the game, and makes the towns and villages more lively for it. You'll suck at sword fighting at first, and have to improve through training and learning combos. Speaking of sword fighting, it's okay. This is probably one of the biggest complaints with the game, and while I don't hate the sword fighting, it's definitely not the highlight of the game for me. When fighting one-on-one, it's actually quite enjoyable and fun to feint your attacks and use footwork to defeat an enemy. Even fighting one-on-two is pretty fun as well, and provides an interesting and fun challenge. However, when fighting 3 or more enemies at a time, the entire combat system completely falls apart. You spend the entire fight walking backwards because if you dare stand still or walk forward for even a second, your enemy will enter a clinch with you, and even if you win the clinch, you'll probably get hit by another one of the enemies surrounding you and take damage. The enemies can maneuver better than you and counterattacks better than you. This gets even worse when fighting enemies clad in armor, as they are significantly better at fighting than your average peasant. And overall, combat against multiple enemies really isn't that fun to do, and this combat system was very obviously not built for this type of fighting, and it shows. Still, I didn't hate this combat because you are rarely fighting a large group of enemies at a time during the main quest, and when you are, it's in the form of a battle, where two large factions fight against each other. This isn't the greatest either, as you could just kind of walk behind the enemy front lines and just wail on them as long as your stamina bar lets you, but at least it doesn't feel broken like fighting multiple enemies. Thankfully, you are rarely doing combat throughout the game, and it's mostly spent engaging with the many systems of this game's world, and this game's world is expertly built. Every main village or town in this game is so memorable and distinctly laid out. In a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, it's hard to tell one town from another, but here, despite them looking the same mostly, they are laid out in such a memorable way, and each town will mean something to you, the player. Maybe you did a memorable side quest, maybe your favorite part of the main quest took place there, or maybe you just made your own fun and planned your own adventure that the game didn't lead you on. But I'll talk more about that later. The NPCs in every town feel like real people who live and breathe as you do. They have their own responsibilities and jobs, and breathe life into this world so effortlessly. The day and night cycle is extremely well built, and each NPC runs on a daily schedule, and you must work around that schedule if you want to interact with them. This consistency in design is one of the rules of the world that I mentioned earlier, and there are many more rules in place that lift this game up so high. One of these rules is a hunger and energy system. If you go too long without eating or sleeping, Henry will have a number of negative effects. If your nourishment stat drops below 50, then your maximum stamina will start to decrease, and so will your health. These stats will continue to decrease the longer you go without getting your nourishment above 50, which you can do by eating food. Similar effects occur when you don't sleep for a long time and your energy stat drops below 50. You will become weaker in combat and walk slower. Henry will constantly yawn and blink, causing the screen to go black for a few seconds at a time if you haven't slept in a while. The maximum stats for your energy and nourishment is 100, except it isn't, because you can't just undereat, you can overeat too. Once again, causing Henry to walk slower and move with more clunkiness to him if your nourishment reaches over 100. There is also the clothing system, where NPCs will react to what you wear and treat you differently based on it. If you're trying to buy a drink at a tavern while wearing bright and shiny armor, the tavern owner will treat you with respect, and even the prices will slightly be discounted for you. However, approach that same tavern owner wearing dirty, beat-up rags, and he'll act more begrudging towards Henry, forcing him to cough up a little extra coin when paying for his drink as well. This ties in beautifully with the reputation and speech system as well. You can build up a high reputation in a town by helping townspeople with their own tasks and quests, or by giving a death row inmate a drink, or helping somebody who's been robbed and chasing down the person who robbed them. And by building up a high reputation in a town, you can use that high reputation to talk yourself out of situations that you might not have been able to avoid otherwise. And through all these rules and systems, you not only begin to connect more to Henry, the main character, feeling like you're really in his shoes, but it also forces you to engage with the game's many systems, such as hunting to replenish your nourishment, or paying for a room in a tavern to get some sleep. You'll need to pay for a bathhouse to wash yourself, and your clothes to be more presentable in front of other people so you're treated better. You might end up using the haggle feature more often when paying for items, because you're constantly needing to save money so you can cover your many expenses. Through all these systems, you so organically begin to connect with this world and the people in it, feeling as though you are merely another man living in the world around you, rather than feeling like some unstoppable protagonist that can do no wrong. You must constantly be aware of your many actions because they have consequences, which is something that cannot be said about many other games. Now, in order to truly explain how this game reacts to everything you do, I'm going to tell you a story from my first playthrough of Kingdom Come Deliverance. There was this one time during my playthrough where I planned a robbery on the local guardhouse. So, I went out, I bought some lockpicks, and then I waited until nighttime. I snuck into the guardhouse and knocked all the guards out, then took all of their gear and ran away. Simple enough, right? Now, the part that surprised me the most about this was the next day when I went into town. I was walking through the main gate, business as usual, when I noticed that one of the guards standing by the gate had no armor on and no weapon with him, just a shirt, some pants, and holding a torch. At first, I thought this was some bug or glitch because the game can be kind of buggy sometimes, but then I realized that's the guard I stole from just the day before, and it will actually take a couple in-game days for his equipment to be refilled. And another guard actually stopped to search me the next day as well. I just can't explain how cool I found all of this. If I hadn't planned that robbery, that guard would have still had all his gear with him, and another guard would have never stopped to search me and ask if I have any contraband on me, because it's, trying to make it look like they're trying to track down the person who did this. They're going around and searching everyone in the town. The world so realistically reacts to your actions, and you notice that constantly, and I just found that so cool. Many other games out there, even great ones like Red Dead Redemption 2 for example, are built around their mission design, and as good as some of those missions are, you are never ever allowed to deviate from those missions, and even random world events in Red Dead 2 aren't so random, they're scripted, and occur only in specific locations and happen only if you happen to pass by said specific location. And while many events in Kingdom Come Deliverance are scripted, many aren't as well, and a lot of the most memorable parts of your playthrough, like that guardhouse robbery that I did, will be events or adventures you created on your own, without any markers or tips telling you where to go. Nobody told me to go rob that guardhouse. It was an event that I did all on my own, and while the guard searching me was a scripted event, it happened only after I robbed the guardhouse, which wasn't scripted. This is one of the many possible ways that Kingdom Come Deliverance uses scripted events to elevate your adventure. As random and organic as world events in Red Dead 2 may feel, there's rarely, if ever, a moment where you need to do something in order for them to happen. You can start 2 playthroughs in Red Dead 2 and go to the exact same spot in both playthroughs, and the exact same event will occur with the same outcome, with the same people as well. Kingdom Come Deliverance does away with this design philosophy and focuses more on creating more memorable, organic events through the player's curiosity and intuition. Now look, I'm not saying that Red Dead 2 is a bad game. It's absolutely not. In fact, it's one of the best games that I've ever played, and has, in my opinion, the greatest story I've experienced in a video game. And having these scripted events isn't necessarily a bad thing. But with time, it will dawn on the player how none of these events feel organic, and it will slowly but surely break the immersion of the game. Kingdom Come Deliverance is built on its immersive qualities, and if it worked like Red Dead 2 did, then its immersion and quality would surely drop. However, unlike Red Dead 2, this game's story isn't quite the best. It starts off extremely strong, and its first 10 or so hours are fantastic, setting the stage for the plot exceptionally. The next 20 or so hours are alright, mostly following an investigative style of storytelling that has you going to different parts of the map and questioning different NPCs to gain knowledge about a group of bandits that are forging money to fund an army. It sounds all kind of complicated, but once you get the hang of the story, it's really quite simple. The premise is interesting, but the execution falls a little short in my opinion. I did enjoy being a medieval detective and questioning the residents of a local town to gain information, but this loop grows stale quickly, and you'll hope for a change in quest design soon throughout those 20 or so hours. Still, the next 5 hours are absolutely amazing and have some of the best main quest content in any RPG that I've ever played. My favorite quest in the whole game, which I won't spoil, takes place in a monastery, and it happens during these 5 hours. This was, in my opinion, the highlight of the main quest, and builds up to the climax expertly well. However, and a big however at that, the final 5 hours of this game are horrendous. I have no idea how Warhorse Studios dropped the ball so hard on the ending of this game. I was originally going to make an entire video talking about how bad this ending is, and I will go into spoilers to go into detail about how much I really don't like this ending. So to avoid spoilers, skip to this time on screen. Alright, now we've got that out of the way, we're going to get into some spoilers for Kingdom Come Deliverance's ending. So, if you haven't clicked off yet, this is your final warning. Here we go. The game's last few hours build up to a massive siege battle with a group of bandits that I mentioned earlier, and features you launching a large-scale attack on their main camp. And this battle is extremely well done and is a satisfying conclusion to the game. Except, it doesn't end here. This battle ends up being a diversion, and through a plot twist, these bandits capture Talmberg while you are distracted. Not too bad so far, right? It's building up to something here. But, right after this is where everything falls apart. This is where the game is at its climax. Peak in its story. This is where you are ready for everything to come to a close in a dramatic and bombastic conclusion. And, for some reason, the writers decide that now is a good time to grind the main quest to a halt and force you to go out and convince some guy to build a trebuchet for you. And then that same guy is worried about an assassin on his tail, so you have to kill or spare, depending on your choices, that assumed assassin. And then you have to wait multiple in-game days for the trebuchet to finish being built. And then you have to do a night raid in order to go and free some hostages from Talmberg. This night raid actually is completely pointless because it fails no matter what you do. Even if you do stealth absolutely perfectly, it still fails completely. It's just another time-wasting part of the story. You have a ton of other optional objectives to do, like bringing food to soldiers or brewing potions that'll help them sleep, etc. However, even without these optional objectives, the last few hours still drag on for way too long. You go like a good 2 to 3 hours of playtime before actually launching the final scale attack. Imagine reaching the climax of the story only to be forced to wait several hours before continuing that climax. It's like if Harry Potter decided not to go fight Voldemort in the forest until he spent another few hours doing random activities first. Now, eventually, past those first hours of boring, drawn-out fetch quests, you'll reach the final battle, which features you and Sir Radzig's army storming Talmberg and taking it back from the group of bandits. The final battle it's okay from a gameplay perspective. It's nothing you haven't experienced yet, but it gets the job done. But once again, when you reach that final cutscene right after this battle, everything falls apart once again. But this time, it's not from a gameplay perspective, but from a writing perspective. And I'm gonna explain why. Actually, no, I'm not gonna explain why. Instead, I'm just gonna let this scene play out and let it speak for itself. This is one of the last cutscenes in the whole game, where you finally confront the main villain after spending hours tracking him down, after spending all this time battling him in this castle and taking it back, after all this time trying to, to find him, track him down, get your father's sword back, and avenge your parents. This is the cutscene that takes place when you finally confront him.
Sir, we are all noblemen here, all bound by honor. I give you my word as a knight and lord, and that of my companions. If you release Lady Stephanie and Sir Radzig, you may leave the castle with your men and go on your way unharmed.
So are you really going to let them go?
My word is my bond, Henry.
He's a cutthroat and a liar. Good men are dead because of him. What's to stop us from skewering him as soon as he sets foot outside?
Our honor!
If you let him go, he'll do the same again. Or worse.
God's justice will find him. And then he'll get a taste of my mace.
If we break our word of honor, we have none. And without honor, we are nothing.
I don't understand how anyone can look at this ending and come to the conclusion that it's a well-rounded story and claim that Henry is a character that has grown over the course of the story. At its core, This is a coming-of-age story for Henry, and while he may grow in terms of strength and age, his mindset remains ever so childish and one-dimensional. Now, of course, this exists to set up a sequel. We all know that. In fact, I'm pretty sure originally they had planned to make this game a little longer or make this into a trilogy or something, I don't know. But it's very clear that this is not the end of the story and we will get a sequel at some point. Except, you can still absolutely round up the main story of your game or movie or book or TV show and still leave room for a sequel. I mean, hell, even this game has a cutscene towards the end that further sets up a sequel with, like, you going away to some castle somewhere. I mean, the last cutscene of the game is you and Sir Hans and a few other people riding away to go sign a treaty or something. I don't really remember, to be honest, but this game sets up a sequel even without having resolved the ending of the first part of the story. Had this game resolved its plot in one way or another, and set up a sequel using other narrative beats, I would have been perfectly fine with this. Except it doesn't do that. It doesn't resolve anything, and you feel as if you've gotten nowhere over the course of the story, and that is a damn shame. Now look, I know I'm harping on for a long time about how much I really don't like this ending, but that's only because I was so enthralled in the main quest leading up until this point. And I still absolutely, despite the ending being weak, I still think this is a main quest that is worth experiencing, and I absolutely would recommend you to play through the entire main quest, despite the ending being kind of lacking. However, despite its many flaws, this game is still spectacular. I have never been so enthralled in a world like this before. I don't want to, tell you about all the systems at play because I want you to experience them for yourself. I want you to feel that same immersion that I felt when I played through this game for the first time. In conclusion, Kingdom Come Deliverance is a mechanical marvel in the video game space, and more specifically the RPG genre. Despite me having ripped into the ending of this game for the last few minutes, its main quest is still very much worth experiencing. With a fantastic take on RPG systems and mechanics, an amazing and memorable world, a reputation and law system that precedes most modern AAA games without being a AAA game itself. This game surpasses anything Ubisoft or Bethesda are capable of building with a significantly smaller budget and team. What Kingdom Come Deliverance has done is nothing short of remarkable, and is a game that every fan of RPGs, open world games, or the medieval genre as a whole should experience. It may not be for everyone, but it certainly was for me, and it just might be for you too. And that is why, in my eyes, Kingdom Come Deliverance is the greatest example of an RPG that has ever been developed.